Hey everyone. To say that Seth Godin needs no introduction in a marketing podcast is really a bit of an understatement. We were honored to have him join our very own Greg Bond for a live discussion in our Revenue Rockstars series here recently. He shared his thoughts on the state of marketing agencies as we close out 2021 and move into 22. And as always, Seth really doesn't pull any punches as he lays out the mistakes that he's seeing marketers make today, and doing that from everything from email marketing to ABM strategy to how to be authentic and cut through the noise. Um, we've really edited this podcast episode down for audio and really cut it for time. So you'll get the core bits of the insights without all of the fluff. So hope you enjoy it, and let's get into it.
Well, thanks for having me. This is my favorite conversation. Yeah, I'm going to it.
Awesome. Well, Seth, there's a lot going on right now in the world, right? With COVID hitting, and we've been in this very strange new world for 2 years or so now, I'm really excited to have you on here to kind of talk through some of the things that we hear from our customers who work with our revenue growth platform and a bunch of the agencies and marketers that we work with. They're out there, they're struggling. They're kind of in it day to day. The go to market has changed for businesses, and everyone moved online, and it really added a lot of noise into that channel. And, buying behavior just sort of fundamentally changed at the same time. And, I'm just kind of curious, like from your perspective, what have you seen that has really changed fundamentally in the last couple of years from the aspect of kind of marketing and sales and revenue growth?
Oh, so we're going to start with a very specific, easy to answer yes and no question.
Yeah.
First, thank you for having me. And thanks to everybody who's here. This is, we're all suffering from trauma from so many things, and the world has been upside down. And I hope that you and yours are finding some level of solace and comfort as we get ready for this revolution, because we are living in revolutionary times. And I guess I will capture this sort of moment uh, by telling you about the supermarket that was near my house when I was growing up. And it had 6 checkouts, and one of the checkouts had a sign on it that said, uh, it was a little picture of a candy with a line through it. Because at the checkout of every supermarket, they got all that stuff that you're looking at when you're checking out.
Hmm.
And this one aisle had nothing that your kid would whine to buy. The other aisles were all about what's on the checkout. And what has happened to this thing that I used to call marketing, that some people used to call advertising, that is now this amalgam of digital marketing, advertising, hype, and promotion, is a lot of people think the only purpose of their day is to get in front of the checkout, to somehow hustle your way to get that easy, quick, last little sale. But what they forget is that the reason you went to the market in the first place, and the brands that are there for the long haul, that the companies that are making a difference and a profit, they're not the ones at the checkout. They're the ones that were worth traveling to go buy the milk for your family or the carrots or the frosted flakes. Because the thing that we get the chance to do is not somehow win some last minute auction for someone's attention, and not somehow sneak around and get their email address. The thing we have a chance to do is work that matters for people who care. That now that the gatekeepers are gone, now that anybody wants to make anything, can make anything and build a store around it, how dare we settle for a hustle that's going to last 4 days? I think that this is a moment a lot of people are waking up and saying, wow, I get to do something that matters.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because people are sort of voting with their, in frustration, right? The GDPR, entering fake email addresses in their, into different form fills. Like, they've kind of become wise to the fact that marketers are out there looking for that quick checkout, that quick return on, hey, you give me your email address and I'm gonna go sell you something, right? Has that, obviously there's an erosion of trust here, but you know, what is it that marketers can do when they're trying to hit these kind of short-term targets and goals, to satisfy the CFO and the CEO, right? Like they have short-term goals that they need to hit it, but what can they do when they I think most modern marketers know that there's a long-term play here. But how do they focus on solving that short-term problem?
So I'll be cynical to begin with and then end optimistic. I wrote a book called Permission Marketing 22 years ago. And when I wrote it, it was considered revolutionary. I helped invent email marketing. And uh, it was inconceivable in those days that brands that we cared about and trusted would hustle us, would steal our email addresses, would buy lists, would spam. And yet today, my bank, a multi-billion dollar bank, spams me on a regular basis because there's a corrosion. Because once you say everyone's doing it, then you do it too. And, the nonsense of that cookies warning that no one reads anymore, that has made no one's life better. And the GDPR and the rest of it is that it didn't make people less cynical. It made them more cynical. So I warn regularly what this industry used to be. Like we used to have a 75% open rate and a 33% response rate to the emails we sent at Yo-Yo. And it's because we were only writing to people who wanted to hear from us. And they were only writing back because they wanted to.
Mhm.
The optimistic part of me says, and this is great news for anyone who has the guts to go the other direction. Because if you are a company that does things, and I know companies like this, that send a note when a year-long subscription is over that says, we're going to renew you next week unless you decide to stop. Or if you're from a company that truly honors when someone opts in and doesn't bother someone who doesn't. If you're a company that uses an SMS text just the way you said you would, when you start acting like that in a cynical world, that's unbelievable. That's like, walking around in a white bridal dress with trumpets playing because people are like, holy moly, these people are legit. And so what I would say to your CFO is if there was someone in your company that every night left with 20 laptops and sold them on the black market and kept the money, you'd fire them. And if there was someone in your company who clocked in and clocked out without showing up, you'd fire them. So why are you letting the marketing department use the one asset you own, which is trust, in a way that's a short-term hustle? Because that's the best way to destroy it. And I think that should be something that limits your career. You should be out of here if you're going to do stuff like that.
Yeah. So, I've talked to a bunch of CMOs recently and a bunch of marketers recently who kind of talk about that dynamic between the CFO, the CEO, and the CMO, and how, hey, we're giving you a bunch of money, go drive revenue, right? Well, the thing that's easy for them is attribution, right? I can get these form fill click throughs. I can attribute where these people are coming from. The thing that's hard, and I know you talk about this a lot, is the brand marketing, the higher level, the top of the funnel, raising awareness, educating the market, and it's kind of like a deposit that you're making or an investment that you're making into the overall size of the pond you get to fish in later. And if you gate it or limit it, right, you're shrinking that size of the pond, and that's fewer deals you get down the road. But the hard part, I think, for CMOs, and this is what I'd love you to speak towards is, how do I justify my job? How do I justify my position and all the money that I'm spending when I'm spending it at the top to grow
Right.
that pond?
Yeah. But back when we were selling email marketing and people thought we were clueless, we could measure everything. And people, whatever numbers we brought back, which were off the charts, they would say, well, that's not enough. I said, well, what are the numbers on your TV ads that you're running? Because you spent more in TV in the last hour than we're asking you to spend this year. Well, we don't measure TV because you can't. Oh, exactly. So just because you can measure something doesn't mean you should, because you might not be measuring the right thing. A fairly well-known company just sold for $12 billion. And one of the ways they got that exit was by sponsoring every podcast they could get their hands on for 3 years. And there was no useful attribution in that, because no one who's driving their car or working out at the gym is going to stop what they're doing and start typing in an attribution code. That what was actually happening wasn't direct marketing, which is measured and you can look at your attributions, was brand marketing. What is your story? What do you stand for? And it's that posture that comes from confidence and generosity. That's what makes brands for the future. It's what built brands of the past. And just because some people are having the short-term success with spending $1 and making two, it's not steady. It doesn't scale.
Mm-hmm. And you've mentioned it a couple of times in this conversation, and I know you talked about it a lot. You talk about trust, right? And trust is really what people are buying, right? They want to trust the person that you're going to help them solve their problem, right? And I think it seems today that the consumer has a lack of trust in brands, and why do you think that is? Where is that coming from?
So first, before I forget, if people have questions, tell them what to do, because by the time we need questions, we're hoping they'll be here. So let's make sure we put that in the queue.
Yeah, go ahead and ask your questions, put them in the queue, and we'll get to those here at the end of this. So yeah, go ahead and drop those in.
So that gets to the heart of what I'm getting at, which is the benefit of the doubt. Trust is a good shortcut for benefit of the doubt, but that's really what I'm talking about.
Mm-hmm.
So we are saying to the audience, we presume that you're going to ask useful questions. We're going to allocate time for that. You like that because it shows that we are treating you with dignity, that we are seeing you as peers. That's what everybody wants, is to be trusted, to be given the benefit of the doubt. And a lot of what's been going on recently with the long, long overdue focus on racial injustice in this country is about the benefit of the doubt. Who do we presume is going to do the thing that we need done? And if you're building a brand, what it means is you are selling to someone who hasn't bought from you before. You are telling them a story about how their life will get better if they do business with you. And if they don't trust you, if they don't give you the benefit of the doubt, they're not going to click on it. So when I was a little kid and got Boys Life magazine, there were all those great classified ads in the back. And one of them was for those x-ray specs where you could put these glasses on, you could see a skeleton hand. And then in the ad, they showed the girl next door and presumed that, you would put these on and, you have all sorts of 12-year-old fantasies come true. And, I'm going to spoil this here for you if you've been thinking about buying x-ray specs, but the way x-ray specs work is built into the little foil there is a picture of a skeleton. So no matter who you look at your dog, it doesn't matter, you still see a skeleton hand. The point of that gimmick is the buyer was sort of in on it, that even at 12, you knew that there's no way there was such a thing as real x-ray specs. And it was fun to imagine. So that was a time a long time ago, a time built around easily giving out the benefit of the doubt because you were doing business with someone who had a store or had a building. But now, no one on the internet knows your dog. Everyone can, you build a store online for $1, that you can pretend anything. You buy things even from famous online retailers, you have no idea where they came from. So everyone's on high alert. And then on top of that, marketers have lost the benefit of the doubt by spamming us and scamming us and hustling us. And so the question is, can you claim the high ground? Can you carefully state things that are actually true? Can you learn to see people? In the short run, you will not get as many sales as the person who's running around picking pockets. But in the long run, they'll be gone and you'll still be here.
No. And I imagine that brands who want to convey, I'm trustworthy, right? You have to be empathetic, right? You have to demonstrate that you know your customer, right? And you talk about it a lot in your books. Who's it for, right? Who's it for? Really, really, truly knowing who's it for. So as a marketer, when you look at your target market, the people that you're going out to, I think marketers, they take the easy way out and they start broadcasting messaging that is brand centric instead of really digging in and understanding their customers. Can you maybe give us a couple of tips or a couple of tricks or a couple of ways in which we can really try to reach in and really get to know our customers well enough that we can earn their trust?
Well, first we'll start with a big brand, and then I'll get much more specific. Uh, you may have heard about a guy named Duncan Hines. He was a real person. I could talk about Duncan Hines all day, but one of the things that Duncan Hines helped pioneer, along with his friend Betty, who wasn't a real person, was cake mix. And when cake mix first came out, it was for everyone. And the way it worked is you took the cake mix, you added water, you put it in the oven, and it didn't sell. And then they figured out they should take out the eggs and the oil. And in order to make cake mix, you needed to add eggs and oil. And sales went through the roof. Because you know who it was for? It was for a busy homemaker who didn't want to be told that she was so busy she couldn't make a cake for her family. And giving that person, trusting that person enough to find eggs, find oil, and mix it together properly was magic, because now that person felt seen. They were saying to themselves, I'm still a homemaker, even though I'm working outside the home. I'm still a homemaker, even though I just got back from whatever, soccer practice. And that is transformative, because if you trust your customer by seeing who they are, they're more likely to feel seen and trusted, and more likely to trust you. Now, when I talk about the smallest viable audience, what I'm saying is not make your business small. I'm saying make your business specific. And a lot of people have a lot of trouble with that. So someone says, oh, you know what I do? I make glasses. Who are they for? Everyone with eyes. Well, yeah, there are a lot of people with eyes, but that's not going to help you succeed. On the other hand, if you say, I wrote a book, who's it for? I only needed to sell 200,000 copies in the United States for that to be a huge bestseller, right? That's less than 1% of the population. To a rounding error, that's zero. I have 0% market share with that book. It's enough. And so being very specific about, what does this person believe? What are they troubled by? What are they afraid of? Who do they trust? What are they leaning into? Can you narrow it down to just 1,000 people? Because I'm guessing the people on this call, you probably didn't make 1,000 new sales today. If you can tell me who those 1,000 people are and ignore everybody else, you have a better chance to trust and be trusted.
So I think, there's been a lot of talk and a lot of interest lately in ABM, account-based marketing, and targeting accounts and reaching out to them. And it sort of flies in the face of permission marketing, basically tapping somebody on the shoulder and saying, hey, I'd like to talk to you about this. Even if you ask permission at that point, you've still broken that trust by, reaching out in the first place. And I'm sure you get it all the time. I get it all the time. LinkedIn and, everybody's sending out messages. They're coming from everywhere and nobody is responding. The conversion rates are incredibly low. Why does everybody keep doing it? Why is everybody flocking towards account-based marketing and sales?
Okay, well, most people don't want to lead, they want to follow. And most people would like a job. And it was fascinating to watch in the early days of Twitter, when there were only thousands of users, not even millions. And the conventional wisdom began to spread about how you were supposed to use it. And instantly everyone started using it that way. And, I don't use Twitter, and everyone said, you're using it wrong. And I don't use Facebook, and people said, you're using it wrong. It's okay to use it wrong if it's helping you and helping the user. But what these people are doing is they have been brainwashed from a young age to be cogs in the system. And this is the current system. And what I say to those people is, you don't have to do that for a living. And every day you do it for a living is a day you are giving up who you are seeking to become. And so the answer, which is what I said to big companies in the year 2000, is, if you're the person with your hands on the machine, don't send spam. And if your boss says send spam, say no. Because if you say yes, now you're a spammer. And the same thing's true if you're using programmatic asks and churning your way through some sort of system, is you've given up your agency. You've given up what you stand for. Don't stand for that. Stand for something better.
I love it. So we just sort of talked a lot about, the erosion of trust and how that sort of came about. Like, is there anything specific that marketers can do today, tomorrow, this week, this year, to regain that trust? Is there anything, any tactic that you can recommend that, hey, this will help you regain trust of your audience and help cut through the noise and start to make a difference?
Well, we haven't talked about the biggest thing, and we can skip over the biggest thing after I say it. But the biggest thing is make better products and make a better service. That everything that touches the market is marketing. And the thing that touches the market the most is what you make and how you make it, which means everyone in the company works for you. The way you answer the phone, the stuff you dump in the river, your pricing, those are all marketing choices. So my friend, the late Tony Hsieh, built $1 billion company by doing customer service in an unreasonable way. The record, I think, is 9 hours to spend on a call calling Zappos. And it's not reasonable to spend 9 hours on a customer service call. But by being unreasonable, that became the product of the company. The shoes were a souvenir. You can get shoes from lots of places. You can only get what Zappos was giving you from Zappos. And I can go down the list of companies big and small that have figured out that that's what they sell. That someone's going to sell something just like yours cheaper on Amazon. For sure. It's a race to the bottom. Do you want to engage in a race to the bottom? Because you might win. And the alternative is to race to the top. So that's the first thing is to change the product or the service.
Well,
Then the second thing,
let's stick on that for a second, and I'll come back to the second thing because I
Yeah.
do think that is an interesting. It's an interesting thing, and I think many of the people on this call probably, and I'm guessing there's a lot of marketers and salespeople, sales managers on this call. But how can a marketer impact product, right? Like what are the things they can do to impact like how the product is delivered and what the product is, right?
right. So either you're a cog in the system or you're a leader. If you're a leader, you have something no one else in the organization has: contact with customers. So start talking to customers and recording it. Make a 2-minute supercut reel of 15 of your customers complaining about something that's not good in your company and start playing that in meetings. And by bringing the customer into the meeting, you are now leading the organization because they will stop making the thing that everyone hates as long as it's really obvious to them that it's getting in the way, right? That what happened at Volkswagen? Where was the marketing department when they saw that Volkswagen was faking its emissions data? Why weren't they saying, our customers will hear of this, and when our customers hear of this, it will cost us billions of dollars? That's their job. I didn't say it was easy, but it's their job. And so the kind of work I'm describing, I sort of lucked into it because I was the brand manager, which meant I ran product and marketing for a company when I was 24. But a friend of mine was the chief marketing officer for JetBlue. Well, what JetBlue does for a living is what American and Delta do for a living. However, she persuaded David, her boss, to also make her the head of human resources because she said marketing and people in the airline business are the same thing because all the planes are the same. So if all the people are hired and trained by the person who also does the storytelling and the promise making, now you've got something that's coherent and consistent.
Yep. All right. So great. Product, make better products. That's tactic number one.
And then the second thing is to realize that unless you make brown rice, black beans, or a shelter, everything you're doing is a story. That people don't need what you sell. They might want what you sell. And wants have stories in the middle. And you get to alter the experience and the way that you talk about it. So, if we look at how a successful Kickstarter succeeds, one of the reasons it succeeds is because the story, the scarcity, the virality of it is so integral to what you're making. So all of this requires you to realize that you're not just saying, if you want average stuff, we got average stuff. Because if you say that, you're in the hustle business. You've got to be able to say, the only people who can give us what we give you is us. And the only people who want what we make is you. And if you can have that system in place, you got a shot.
Yeah. Along those lines, there's actually some questions coming in here. And I saw one pop up that from Nathan Nazario that I thought kind of goes along the lines of what we're just talking about here. Is he's asking, what's the best advice for finding your authentic voice, authentic marketing voice to build trust?
I love this question because it always gets me into a fight. Authenticity is nonsense. Your customers do not want you to be authentic. Maybe your spouse does, but that's about it. When we buy something, when we follow someone, when we listen to something, we don't want the authentic version of them. We want the best version of them. That, if you're going to go out and buy the new Taylor Swift album, you don't want it to know that it's not that good because she had a cold that day. You want the best faked version of Taylor Swift that is available in this moment. And the same thing is true for McDonald's, but it's also true for the local high-end restaurant. The chef's having a bad day and had a fight with her spouse. You still want it to be delicious. So let's replace the word authentic with consistent. What do we sound like when we sound like us? How can we sound more like us? Howard Schultz famously shut down Starbucks a couple years ago for a day to train everybody. Well, do the math. You could have just trained them in 3 shifts and not shut down. Why shut down? Because you're going to send a message. And the message you're going to send to your people is the same message you send to your 4-year-olds on a trip. Don't make me pull this car over again, right? That what we're saying is if we don't sound and smell and feel like Starbucks, we got nothing. So we're going to shut the whole place down to remind us what it even means to be us.
Yeah, to be the consistency in your messaging, right? A couple of years ago, I was at a conference and I heard the CMO from REI talk about the fact that they shut down on Black Friday, and so that their people could, take the time off and go outdoors. And as a retail store, everyone looked at them like they were crazy, but it was consistent with their brand message, and their sales increased even though they shut down on Black Friday.
Correct.
It's amazing. Consistency, right? I agree. I think you're right. When you first said authenticity, I was like, I don't know, but I think you're right. Consistency is more important. So thanks for that. All right, let's see if there are any other questions. There's one from Barbara Casey.
I was hoping you would pick that one.
So how do you reach out to a cold contact, Seth?
Oh, Barbara. They're not a contact if they're cold. They're an innocent bystander. Now, there's a difference, a very big difference between people at work and people at home. If you're at work and you are the purchasing manager in the apparel department of Ralph's Big and Small Shop, it's your job to have people reach out to you with new kinds of clothing. That's not spam. That's your job. There's an engagement there. If you go to a trade show and you walk past a booth and someone says, "Excuse me," there's nothing wrong with that. That's why you went to the trade show. On the other hand, if you're a lawyer and you're running around waiting for people to trip and fall and then running up to them and throwing business cards at them, that's not okay. You will not be a respected, high-profile, trusted lawyer if that is the way you're going to get clients. So I begin with this. Just because it might be legal and technically feasible for you to reach out to someone doesn't mean they're your contact. It means that you're being a little lazy. If Steven Spielberg dropped his cell phone and you picked it up before it locked itself and you had access to his whole Rolodex, you can't pick up the phone and call Amy Irving or George Clooney just because you have their phone number. It's not going to work because you didn't earn the reputation. And then what makes somebody who is successfully at the center of a trust circle successful, they've earned it. So the alternative, I have a blog post you can read on this, is called First 10. And it's really simple. There are 10 people who trust you enough to listen to what you have to say. There are 10 people who will happily hear your pitch. After you do that, then what happens? Well, if it's really good and really focused and really beneficial, they'll tell the others. And if they don't tell the others, make it better. And this is the advice I give to authors all the time. Write your first book and send free copies to 100 people. If no one writes back saying, "Do you have any more?" then you're not a good enough writer yet. Write some more. But if you will start writing back saying you got more, you're on your way to having a career because you're doing something that people want. And I think stamps were magical. Stamps were the friction that direct marketers needed in 1980. Because if you could pay for a stamp, it came with the privilege of putting that letter in my mailbox. But there are no stamps with email, and there's no stamps really on LinkedIn or social media. So don't pretend there are. Instead, figure out how to get people to hear about you from someone they trust, as opposed to being bothered.
So interesting. And I love that you say, just get started, just start doing it, do it a little bit, grow it a little bit more, get better while you do it. But I think it's interesting because when you really look at a B2B business, or, anyone who's trying to grow and scale their business, if they're not doing inbound, which I think is a lot what was happening during, COVID, a lot of people hadn't really embraced digital and inbound, and they started throwing money at inbound, and it was expensive. It cost them a lot of money, but they either got good at it, and now they're spending very little on something that's producing dividends, or they gave up on it and decided to go the spam route or the ABM route. That kind of how you read it.
Yeah. And the thing is, in 25 years of doing this, I keep bumping into people who succeed for a little while with that, or people who somehow hack SEO and succeed for a little while at that. They're not here anymore. I'm looking around. I'm not hearing from them. That it is a short run hustle, and then you got to go do something else. I think it's better if you're prepared to commit to this thing, to commit to it and to put your name on it and to own it.
Well, I'm going to grab another question here from Sandy. In organizing marketing for growth, what do you see as the biggest change in how marketing orgs are built, including multiple generations working together, especially during these revolutionary times you mentioned?
Right. So my professor in 1983, George Mayfarth, corrected me after I'd left college, I said I had gotten a job at this company. I was really pleased because it was a marketing-driven company. And he said, I don't think it is. I think it's a market-driven company. And there's a huge difference. To be marketing-driven means you go to a lot of meetings. It means you have an agency. It means you're discussing things like gross rating points and logos. To be market-driven means that you talk about your customers all the time. And in a multi-generational marketing organization in particular, tactics aren't like, I don't care if you're a TikTok expert. Being a TikTok expert is good on Tuesday, and then on Wednesday, you got to start over. So what we need instead is for you to talk to me about your customers. Are you getting traction with your customers? Are your customers talking about you? When your customers talk about you, what do they say? And I saw we had a question earlier about online content. I mentioned earlier, I don't use Twitter or Facebook, but people talk about me on Twitter and Facebook all the time because I give them something to talk about. They don't talk about what I had for breakfast. They talk about what I wrote this morning. That's why I write it, because they want something to talk about. And I'm giving it to them, not because they're trying to help me, but because talking about it helps them gain status and affiliation in an area they're interested in. That doesn't just work for bloggers. That works for REI. That works for Patagonia. That works for people who do, wastewater treatment plants. That's what we get to do. We build a story that people want to talk about.
Love it. So, Linda wrote in and said, your comment about racing to the bottom by making your product cheaper is gold. Thank you for that. Should you only brand yourself as quality and or unique? What else should be in the mix?
Okay, let's talk about what those two words mean, because it's super important. Quality does not mean luxury. Luxury is a useful thing. There are a lot of luxury brands that do great. Luxury means this costs a lot and you paid extra happily. Quality means this meets spec. So if I look at a Rolls Royce and a Toyota Prius, a Rolls Royce is a luxury car, but it is a better quality car to buy a Prius because it meets spec. It does what it says it does every single time. So making something of quality simply means, did you define the spec accurately? And I think we can agree that that's a requirement. Uniqueness means you don't have any competition. And that's very unlikely. Unless you have a prescription a patent on a prescription medicine that cannot be replicated, someone can figure out a way to replicate the molecules of what you make. What I think we mean by uniqueness is this. Does telling myself and the people around me which brand I bought make the thing I bought feel better to me? And if the answer is yes, then it's worth it. So if you buy brand name ibuprofen, Motrin, or whatever it's called, instead of the generic one, you're doing it not because you're stupid, but because that story is worth it to you. And one way that I like to think about this, to put it in the most black and white sense, is this. If you have ever given money to charity, the only reason you've ever done it is because the story of the donation was worth more than the amount you donated. In fact, giving to charity is a bargain. We only do it when it's on sale, because if the person who puts in the $3 million to build the building and name it after their kids thinks that's worth $4 million. And so we don't have to be shy about asking for the money, because we're actually giving them value. And the same thing's true with everything that we sell and engage with in the marketplace. Is it worth more because it has my name on it? If it doesn't, then what exactly are you doing all day?
Awesome. So there's a couple of people that have been asking for us to go back to one of these earlier questions that I sort of skipped over. I'm going to head back to that one now. But how do you think about thought leadership in the B2B marketing mix?
Okay, so thought leadership. Thought leadership is not the same as content marketing with a capital C and a capital M, which got corrupted into here's a way to hustle search engine. Actual thought leadership means I can imagine being in your shoes. I can imagine the industry that you work in, and I would like to speak up, saying some things that other people will disagree with about how we can make things better for us. And I will do that in the hope that you will echo what I said. And you will echo what I said because it will make your life better. And if those things start to happen, I will be seen as a thought leader because I just made it safe for you to speak up. And everyone on this call is smart enough to do that. And most of us have been brainwashed to not do that, because to do it means you have to say something that people will disagree with. And I'm very lucky that Barbara's a good sport, because I disagreed with Barbara, but she doesn't hate me. But that's the point. Thought leadership is, I have a point of view. It might not agree with what you think you want, but if you think about it, you might come around to believe that it's in your interest.
And there's sort of a related topic that I want to dive into there a little bit more, Seth, is when we talk about thought leadership, I know a lot of brands will go, well, yeah, we put out a lot of thought leadership and then we put it behind a content gate and we need your email address. Is that thought leadership?
Well, it might be. I mean, so one of the ideas in permission marketing was there are lots of reasons why someone will trade you their attention. And so if you say to people, give me your email address and I will send you this thing of value, maybe they will, particularly if you say, and then you will get other things of value in the future. I value your attention enough to make that transaction. But if you're just going to hold it hostage, then people are going to use Mailinator or something else to get what they want and then go away. It's really permission if you earn the ability to have follow. Now, when we think about institutions that are changing their industries by speaking up, and I'll use Patagonia as an example. Patagonia, well, they used to make pieces of metal for rock climbers who didn't bathe very often, and that was all they did. And now they're clearly a leader when it comes to sustainability and actively working on issues around climate. Well, not everyone wants to hear that. I don't know why, but not everyone wants to hear that. And the people who do are eager to hear more of it. And it would make no sense to hold that hostage for an email address.
So couple more questions here. There's a study that I saw recently that talked about CMOs and how their tenures is decreasing significantly. And, you know, with everything going on that we talked about earlier in this, all the struggles that people are finding, I mean, I can't imagine that there aren't CMOs out there that have kind of either figured it out or, you know, or at least making good enough inroads into be able to prove to the CEO and CFO that they're doing what they need to be doing. Why are why are CMOs and why is their tenure shrinking so much? Why do you think?
Right. So the last data I saw is 18 months at big companies. This has nothing to do with the quality of the people. It has to do with the mistake that the organizations make and the fact that the CMOs play into it. The mistake is, oh, you mean we trade you money and you magically go our business? We'll do that deal. And you can go to fun meetings and you can change our logo and you can have an agency, but you need to keep that promise. And it takes a year for the CEO to realize that promise isn't going to come true and 6 months to find a replacement. And so boom, you're out. Don't make that deal. That's not what the CFO doesn't say to the CEO, let me do whatever I want for a year and a half and the stock price will double, because that's not how it works. And so the promise that the CMO has to make is A, everything is marketing, which means anything this organization does that touches the market, I need to have my fingerprints on. And two, marketing is about telling a story that's unique and a story that builds over time. And you will be able to measure our ability to tell a resilient story, not because our numbers go up, but because the feedback, the quality of conversation, the side effects of what we do show it early and often. And we'll compound that. We're not here to run a slot machine. We're here to change the culture.
Yeah. And I think, even in our business, and I'm going to get a little more personal here with the marketing automation platform. I think marketers come into our marketing automation platform and they think it's a slot machine, like you just said. You put in a quarter, you get out $1. You set up some templates and landing pages, and hey, turn it on, and money comes rolling in. And it's just not how it works, right? And so, what do you say to people who, maybe that was their original thought process around this, but let's change their paradigm. Well, what should they be doing when they have a tool like marketing automation?
So I am so lucky that I grew up as an intuitive marketer who showed up in person. That you need to figure out how to go to the bus station, if there's still a bus station in your town, with a $10 bill and see if you can sell it to someone for $5, because most people will have trouble doing that. You need to figure out how to get on a StreamYard and make a streaming video with 10 customers watching until someone, after hearing what you had to say, buys from you. That this idea that we can look someone in the eye and engage with them is totally different than saying, I'm going to send $400,000 to Facebook and I expect to get $600,000 back. Why? Right? You wouldn't click on those ads. Why are these people clicking on those ads? And this still gets back to guts. It gets back to generosity. Do you have the generosity to do something that might not work on behalf of your customers, to do it with them, not to them?
I love that. Love that. There's a question that Aaron wrote in about earlier, and I'm going to expand upon it a little bit, which said, marketing seems to operate in silo in many companies. How would you advise marketers to involve cross-functional teams in the company's marketing strategy? And my expansion on that is, talk as well about this historical divide between marketing and sales, where they point at each other and say, well, no, the leads suck. Well, no, you're not doing your job.
Okay, a couple of stories to start with. Ike Sewell, the famous Cadillac dealer of Dallas, #1 Cadillac dealer in America. What he did is every 3 months, he made his sales manager and his service manager switch jobs for a week. And so for a whole week, the sales manager was hearing in the service bay, wait, the salespeople promised me this, this, this. And for a whole week, the service manager was hearing in the thing, but your service people, and the humility that it caused was spectacular. And my career changed when I spent Christmas Day, 1983, answering the phones at Spinnaker Software, because every single family that had software that didn't run, oh, we'll just call the number, see what happens. And I was the only person sitting there, and I learned a ton. And my writing, my manuals, everything I did got way better because I was in front of that. And so I think if you're serious about cross-functional, go get serious about cross-functional. You should be sitting with the people who design the car, not just wait till the car comes off the assembly.
Awesome. So we had a question in here, and it kind of talks about some of the things we talked about earlier with trust and regaining trust of your audience. And Suvesh, I think is his name. I'm sorry if I messed that up, but Suvesh said a lot of brands adopt causes to fast track their credibility and trust with their audiences. And his question is, do customers see through that? And I think even beyond causes, right? I think the customers today are savvy enough to see through when a brand is doing something for themselves and not for their customer, right? I mean, this is happening everywhere. This is why we talk about there's a lot of noise in the channel, right? Brands are putting themselves first and not their customers first, right?
When you talk to people in the old days about TV advertising, everyone hated TV advertising except for the ads that they liked. And everyone is skeptical of other brands except for the brands that they like. And I don't really believe that, with the very few exceptions like Patagonia, that the brand, I don't believe Apple cares about privacy at all, for example. I think Apple said, our data shows that we got a leg up over Google if we profess to care about privacy. But if we are consistent about it, people who want to believe us will believe us. And so you're performing a service. So I'm not saying that any of these brands are charities. What I'm saying is that you have a chance to act on behalf of the customer in the short run when it's painful for you, and in the long run, come out ahead. But as you pointed out so beautifully, if all a brand is doing is hustling people by, sending a nickel to a charity, I don't think that works on anybody anymore.
No. The customers and the consumers have gotten too wise to that, and they can see right through it. So I was talking earlier with some marketing professionals, and one of the things that we were talking about was just that, there are a lot of brands out there who are working really hard to drive as much traffic into their websites, paid ads, all this traffic into their websites, and going through the hand raise, I want a demo, right? Like B2B marketing, I want a demo, is by far the best way for us to convert those customers into sales and into revenue, right? People who are saying, yes, I want it. But then there's all these other tactics that are being used through SEO to drive downloads and people connecting. Which one of those, or what's the difference between, if you count them both as MQLs? Is one an MQL? Is one not? Is one a lead? Is one not? And is that even the wrong question altogether? Should we just be saying, hey, if they're interested in talking to a salesperson, that's a person who you want to capture?
Yeah. Now you nailed it. And the word I use for this is enrollment. Enrollment has been corrupted by public school because every kid has to be enrolled in school. But what I mean by enrollment is someone who wants to. So if you think about, how would you create a baseball fan? Well, one way you could do it is by teaching the history of baseball, then having tests about baseball, and then having more tests about baseball, and then letting someone go to a baseball game. That is a really stupid way to make baseball fans. But that is the way school works. And when we're talking about marketers and selling, if someone is interested in going where you are going, you don't have to hustle them. You just have to say, that's where we're going. And this goes back to the idea of the smallest viable audience. You say, we're going over there, and you mean it. The people who are going over there will want to come with you. And it doesn't make any sense you have an airline to try to persuade people they want to go to Puerto Rico. What you need is to find the people who want to go to Puerto Rico and let them know that's where you go.
Right. So there's another question that came up that's kind of similar to one that I asked earlier, and I'm just wondering if there's a slightly different take on it. John asks, interesting take on the CMO. In a profit-driven world, how do you convince a CEO to commit to those objectives without impact to revenue?
Right. Well,
I think this is the question, right? How do you get that CEO to say, go ahead, do the brand building stuff, spend that money on it, and not look at the marketing and the CMO and say, hey, you're not driving revenue?
Yeah. Well, you're a marketer. So your job is to tell stories that are true, that change people. And it depends on how much enrollment you have from the CEO. But I'm imagining you invite the CEO to lunch in your office. You have three kinds of, absolute vodka. You got George Clooney's branded tequila. You got Domino's pizza and, place settings from some fancy French brand. They say, you know what? Every single one of these brands is worth more than us. And everyone became worth more than us without doing $1 of behind the scenes black arts hustle. They all did it by building a brand that stood for something. And when you think about where this company is going, when you talk to our investors, when you talk to our partners and our customers, what kind of words do you use? Are you trying to win the gum at the checkout sweepstakes? Or are you trying to build a brand that people would miss if it were gone? Because if you're trying to do the second thing, that's what I'm here to do. Take a look. It works. It just doesn't work paying for itself on a daily basis. It works because we have the guts and the resources to get to the other side.
Yeah. And I'm assuming that if you're doing this correctly, your sales team probably feels like they're just getting really good at sales. And they're pointing at all the deals coming in and saying, man, I don't know where this deal came from. Showed up on the last day of the month, right? That's what it feels like when you're doing this correctly.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to have some fun, look at all the people who say they were integral to the growth of Google on the sales side. The number of people who say, I was a salesperson at Google, I made all the difference. Nah, they just answered the phone and took orders.
All right. I'm gonna see if I can find a couple more questions for us, Seth, before we wrap up here.
Perfect.
Let me see what we have. All right. How about Permanente Medicine says, how do you think about using personas to describe your target customers?
Okay. So a persona is insider marketing shorthand for a stereotype. And stereotypes are toxic and horrible when we use them to hurt other people, to leave people out. But internally, calling somebody, obsessive auto and saying obsessive auto is the kind of person who notices typos on our website. Obsessive auto is the person who puts into their calendar when the subscription expires, and on and on and on. That's a persona. And there is no one in the real world who is exactly like obsessive auto. But having that person as a paradigm for the kind of thing we are trying to do, person we're trying to serve, enables us to please a viable part of the market. And so, if you go a couple years ago when I was back flying, had a couple hours in Pittsburgh. So I went to see a Pittsburgh hockey game because I'd never been to see one in Pittsburgh. I grew up in Buffalo. And there are a lot of persona driven characters at a Pittsburgh Penguins hockey. And you can see they're parodies of themselves. How did they become that? They became that because the organization gave them the tools to become that. It made them into heroes. It sold them the gear to become that. And the way it feels inside the arena is totally different than it felt at a hockey game 40 years ago, because they decided which personas they wanted in the room. And the same thing can be true for just about any company you want to deal with. I buy my spices from a company called Burlap and Barrel. And, you get a thing about this big for $7. You could definitely get cheaper spices, but they don't want you if you want cheaper spices. They want someone who wants to know the first name of the person who grew that pepper. And by knowing the persona and making something for that persona, they make it more likely that that persona will show up.
It's going back to the being specific about product, everything that touches the market. So one last question here from Suvesh. How important is it for brands to have a customer experience officer?
If you don't have an experience, you don't really have a customer. Does your organization need one human being whose job it is to do that? I hope not. Maybe you do. But what I would really love it is if the marketing ethos was so deeply understood that even the bureaucrats on the 5th floor look at the form that you're making people fill out to become a vendor and say, this experience is terrible. I'm not shipping it. And, I know, having dealt with banks for, most of my adult life, Banks need a chief experience officer on every floor and in every interaction, and they don't have any because they decided it was a department as opposed to a mindset.
Yep. Well, I'm going to come back to you at the very end, Seth. I want to make sure I give you the last word here. So think about what that's going to be. But in the meantime, I just wanted to thank everybody for joining us here today. We are going to be offering, for those of you who are watching this, we have a special offer for 50% off onboarding of SharpSpring and your first month free. It's only for those people listening live. We're going to cut this out of the recording. So it's only for you guys, special for those people who showed up live here to watch this webinar. We appreciate you guys doing that. You can go to sharpspring.com/revenue rockstars. You can sign up for a demo right there on the page. You can also sign up for Revenue Rockstars the rest of the series. And make sure you mention when we set up your demo that you came through the Revenue Rockstar series. Make sure you mention that. Make sure we get you the offer as well as the Revenue Rockstars t-shirt. And the next Revenue Rockstars session is going to be November 17th, 2 p.m., where we'll be doing an agency partner panel. With that, Seth, love for you to have the last word here. And I imagine there's a lot of revenue-focused marketers out there watching this webinar who could probably use a little bit of an encouragement from the godfather of modern marketing at the moment. What do you have to say?
Marketers always want to have the last word, and we never do. The customer always has the last word. What I will tell you is a quote from my friend Shalene, which is, there's no doubt you're going to succeed. You already have. The question is, will you choose to matter? Because that is the path you really signed up for. And if we do that work, everything else takes care of itself.
Awesome. Thanks, Seth. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. Go make a ruckus, everybody.